Divine director, we've kind of talked about. This is really about providence and predestination. If we are to say that there is no such thing, let's say, there's no such thing as an actual future. The future is made up of present decisions, of present choices, here and now. So the choices I make right now will affect the next moment, and therefore the journey and path that I will take. Okay? That is what the future holds. Okay? What do we mean by God knowing the future? What I think God has is an intended future. He can know the actions that we take right now, how that will end up. If we carry on that path, he knows where we're going. Okay? So in the prophetic literature, there's a very much about talking about the now and what it leads to, consequence of action. Okay? So he can predict those consequences. Okay? In physics, I was talking to David Wilkinson, so I've got a stamp of scientific approval on this. In physics, the things that we can predict the future on are in simple structures. So the planets and Newton's theories of law and of gravity and all of those things, you can predict it because there are simple actions. Okay, there's a simple structure to it. Okay, so when Newton was around, you could just wind the clockwork planetarium around, and it would just go, and all the planets would move in sequence to the place that they were meant to go to, and there was no way of changing that. Okay, but when scientists try and predict the weather, they can't. It's what's called the butterfly effect, because if we are going to know what the weather's like in Durham in 3 weeks' time, we're going to have to take in a whole load of complex chaos kind of things that could impact that, like a butterfly's wing in Rio de Janeiro. That's what's called the butterfly effect. So weather and other things are chaos structures, and we can't predict the future because there's so much going into that decision. So, how much can we know the future? And in particular, how can we as directors or leaders know the future? We sometimes talk about vision. God, give us a vision. Give us a vision of what the future looks like in the next 5 years. And sometimes leaders come and they say, do you know what? I think I see this church doing this, this and this. That is just an intended future. Okay? In order to get there, you need to make decisions here and now. You need to make decisions right now. And you need to continue making decisions based on that intended future. My problem with the vision of a leader is sometimes they haven't really thought out the process to get there. That the product then shapes the process that you're in, rather than allowing the character of Christ and the story of God to impact on that. God has an intended future for us all, but it's not actual. He gives up the actual future to allow our participation. I'm going to tell you a story to finish on this one. Peter Brook, when he first started directing, aged sickeningly at 17, age 19 he was in the RSC directing Love's Labour's Lost. And he turns up to the rehearsal room with a prompt script, which is basically a script with all the entrances and exits marked out, with all the actors' movements, the tone of voice, the pace at which they are to speak, and the breaks in which they are to breathe. So he turns up with this, and he goes through the first scene with the actors, and he tells them exactly where to go. And he goes, well, I want you to be out of the scene by this point, so you need to exit at this point. So if you go through that door and you go hurriedly and all of these things. And so the actors learn this, and they come on and they perform it, and they do it spot on. They do it exactly right. And he says in his diaries, he says, I witnessed a lack of life. There was no truth in that activity. There was just mechanical doing it, and they did it very well, but there was no truth in it. The next day, he decided to put down the prompt script and enter in amongst the actors. And he worked with them. He experienced what they were experiencing, the encounters, the characters, and he wrestled with them with that. And that meant that the actors came up with ideas that he hadn't even thought of. Okay? That they were participating, they were engaged, and those affected the future of the product. But in that moment he was working, he had an intended future. He had this kind of sense of, I need to get to this point, okay? But the way that we go is really up for grabs, and All I want is them to be faithful to the character and to the story. And so he lived in amongst them. He became like one of them, but one of them that has a decision, who was able to say, that is faithful to that character, go with it. That is faithful to the story that we are telling, go for it. That is not faithful to the character, we can't do that. That is not faithful to the story, we can't do that. So there's a sense of collaboration going on there. And he says that he's never picked up a prompt script since. And in terms of the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit coming in, working amongst us, being in dialogue with us, allowing us to be free agents, to make decisions that really matter, and for God to say yes, and for God to say no. But actually, the power of God's story is that he never says no, he just lets you live out the consequences of your actions. Every time he's watching you, every moment he's present going, okay, you took a step wrong there, shall we try again? We've taken another step wrong, shall we start again? And so when we cast off the journey that we've been on and the trajectory that we're on, at any moment we can make a decision not to carry on that trajectory. We can go, I'm going to choose another way. And that, what I think, is what's happening in conversion. That is what I think is happening in the Christian walk, that every moment we are alive and we are interacting with people, we've got stuff to do, we need to make the decision, is this glorifying God or is this glorifying another person? Am I acting in a Christ-like character within the story of God?